what kind of problems do you want? Do you want those problems, which are hiring, firing, payroll, like all the things, or other problems from being an associate, not being able to make your decision, not being able to do this?
So yeah, Alex, thanks. I wanted to first off start by saying thank you for noticing my haircut that I got yesterday.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I think were you the one that even made the appointment for me?
Yeah,
probably. So no.
Well, your hair is getting a little bit longer than mine.
Yeah, it was. Oh yeah, it was getting a little long, and I just got lazy.
Yeah.
I don't know how. This is the first time I've had long hair. I don't know how long you're supposed to cut it, any of that stuff. I think I just wait until you tell me like just cut it.
Yeah,
it's getting gross.
Yeah, let's just keep that.
Yeah. So anyways,
nicer.
I went yesterday, got my hair cut, felt good. And then, whenever you go to, I don't know if this is how all salons are, but at least this one is, where, you're on your way out and they're like, here's the products I use, buy these, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that makes sense. I didn't get anything. I can usually use the husband excuse of, let me take a picture of it and ask my wife first, right? I feel like the patience we have, right?
Yeah,
they do the same thing.
yeah,
I'm
same.
definitely that husband in that scenario.
Yeah, I got to ask your partner. Yeah.
And then it got me thinking, I was like, I remember as a kid, I don't know if you remember seeing these when you were growing up, but when they always had their products on the side, right, that they were trying to sell, they were always like Paul Mitchell.
Yeah.
You remember all those?
Big brand, yeah.
Yeah. And then I kind of went into it and I was like, I kind of wanted to know the story of that. And it was actually a really interesting story about the guy who started it.
Okay.
So it was John Paul DeJoria. Okay, so we'll go back to like the early 80s when it started. So this guy went in the Navy for a couple years, got out, had some kind of like odd end jobs for a bit. Then he started working for Redken.
Okay.
Which another hair company, probably the only two that I know of. And he ended up getting fired. So he was in his like 30s. He's divorced. He has a 2-year-old, and he's living in his car with his 2-year-old that's in like the back seat.
Oh, geez.
And he then reaches out to his buddy Paul Mitchell, who's in the hair industry. I think he's like a hairstylist.
Yeah.
But doesn't have any business background, and is like, we should start a hair care company. And when we do this, though, let's create a premium product and sell only to salons so it feels very exclusive.
Okay.
So they started with just $700, did everything in one of their bathrooms, right? So it was just pretty much just in a house, mixed all the stuff themselves. And then he just started going door to door, just hustling, going to every salon saying, hey, try our product, obviously getting tons of no's and stuff like that. And then eventually, though, through his perseverance, just grit, within the first year, I think they did about like $1 million in sales.
Holy.
Then by year 3, I think they were around, I think it was 3 to 6. And then by the year 6, they were like 20 million in sales.
Jeez.
So they just scaled this thing and grew it huge. And this guy he to this day, it's still privately owned. Right. I think Paul Mitchell passed away in like the late 80s, but he still kind of ran the company. They do over $1 billion in revenue.
Oh my
this
gosh.
dude is also the guy who, I think he was either one of the co-founders or early in Patron tequila and in House of Blues. So he's kind of been everywhere. And it just kind of got me thinking like, wow, like if you have certain, there's like certain traits people have or personality styles that either, I don't know if you're born with it or you can learn it, but that it doesn't matter like what situation you put that person in, they're just going to crush it.
Yeah. Wow, what a crazy story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why we brought on Brian Hanks. He works with dentists all the time, and when they're looking to like buy dental offices, and I think he probably knows the traits of people and like dentists that will actually make it work.
Well, yeah, I figured that would be cool. So thanks for coming on, Brian.
Hey, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I came prepared with 4 traits that a successful dentist has, but I'm adding a 5th after that discussion. It's great hair. So great hair is obviously the key to being a good dentist.
Absolutely.
Well, let's just dive into it.
Let's unpack that. So what kind of traits do you see like over and over again in dentists that no matter like what they buy, they're going to succeed?
Okay. Like I said, I have 4, and thank you guys again for having me. I do a lot of transitions in the country. Every year, we probably will value somewhere between 300 and 500 dental practices this year in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
And will help 100 to 150 dentists transition and buy their practice. And it's really interesting to me to see the commonalities between those that really struggle and then those that succeed. Some immediately out of the gate after they own a practice, some after a little time. And the number one thing, so I thought through and I was like, and I jotted a list down and I was kind of playing with it and I bounced it off my team. Everyone agreed. The number one factor that separates those that are successful from those that struggle is a robust personal network of other dentists and dental professionals that know, like, and trust you as a dentist. And I can say more about this, but Eric, Alex, I know you guys are pretty prominent on social media. We have not prepared this question. In fact, I may flame out in massive failure with this question, but I have one for you guys. So I see you guys comment on social media a decent amount. You're out there, you have a podcast. Is it true that there's like 1, 2, maybe 3 dentists out there that tend to comment or, interact with you guys in some way? Are there like audience-y people that you kind of see names of frequently enough? You maybe haven't met personally, but like, them because they comment on your stuff or at least like interact with you in some way online?
Yeah. There's a few people that always do, especially. And what I found that's interesting is it depends on what group you're in. So it's like if you're looking at like Paul Goodman's group with Nachos, like I feel like there's like a group of that they comment a lot on it. So it's kind of fun because then you kind of become like these like Facebook friends with people, and you almost feel like them. Totally. Like there was one guy who he had posted. I had posted something about like orthodontics and stuff like that and doing it as a GP, and he was like, I hate clinical dentistry and I hate ortho even more. And I sent him that gift back of like Step Brothers where they're like, did we just become best friends? Because I feel like that is kind of how I feel too. So well, for sure.
It's funny. I here's the point of that question is when I say a robust personal network of dentists and dental friends and people in the industry, my criteria is someone knows your name, recognizes who you are, and would be willing to like reach out and answer a question or do a favor or facilitate an introduction or something like that. So I do mean, yes, like buddies from dental school. If you went through residency with some people and you've stayed in touch, the dentists in your area that you show up in the study club and they're there. I mean, those people that you kind of know face to face. But Eric, I would be willing to bet that even if you haven't met those dentists personally and you've only seen them comment, if they reached out to you, specifically, and was like, hey, Eric, got a favor for you about the podcast. I'll bet you just knowing you and the type of person you are, you'd probably do a favor for them, right? You would consider them in your personal network.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. And that happens.
I
mean, it does.
It actually has.
They reach out to him about something random about the podcast or whatever. And now Eric has a new best friend. So.
Yeah. So
that's my goal. Every week, new best friend.
Did we just become best? It's you guys have such a technically difficult career. In fact, my oldest son, he's 17. He just got his wisdom teeth out on Friday a week ago today. 20 minutes in and out. He only had 2 teeth, so it was a little easier situation. But like 20 minutes, they put him to sleep. They took the teeth out, they woke him back up, and he's in my car 20 minutes later. That's incredible. First of all, you guys do amazing work, even if it's not extractions like that. But it's so heads down, no pun intended, or pun slightly intended. It can be so focused that it is easy to kind of go in your little cubby hole and just focus on the clinical, and maybe you're worried about this assistant and are we going to have enough patients and those things. So if you just interact with people, and yes, I could, phone calls and texts and lunches are like the best, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the point of my question is, just, get out there, comment on posts, listen to podcasts, be the one that leaves a review on Eric and Alex's podcast. Like that's the type of thing that's going to get you that robust personal network.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, I know I struggle with this more than you, Eric, because you'd rather like have everyone to be your friend and stuff like that. And that does work for you.
Yeah.
It's harder for me because I do like to stay in my lane, stay by myself. And
I think a lot of dentists maybe, I don't know, it was interesting. We took you take like personality tests and stuff like that. And I think a lot of dentists fall maybe into your category more where they're very technical. They like to be by themselves. They're smart. I'm probably the opposite of all of those, but like, you know what I mean? Like like, I remember I would take some personality tests and I was like, I kind of like am the opposite a lot of what dentists are. And so for me, I probably always, that's why I think I always geared more towards like the business side of it and liking that more than the actual clinical piece of it. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think that's true because we had that really good Facebook group of we had like 70 dentists that were all like-minded, and we helped. This is kind of, before a lot of the Facebook groups were around, and we would just help each other, like without anything, any motivation or anything like that. It was like, hey, you're opening this practice or you're buying this thing. Here's this system. This worked for me, and it was just really good help. So instead of you having to like try and fail and then try and fail and try and fail, it was, hey, what's that solution that works? And it's like, oh, okay, I just shortcutted this thing and now I have a really good system that works for me.
Or like the group was nice because it was people in different points in their startup journey, like within a few years. So you had some guys who had done their startup for 2 years and doing really well. And so when someone like new kind of was in the group or was just starting up, you could rely on someone who's done it before and get like proof of what's worked and hasn't worked. So it definitely helped us make better decisions.
Yeah. Just to reassure you a little bit, Alex, you sound completely normal to me. And I would tell the dentist, I'm going to give 4 kind of bits of advice or kind of areas where I see people be successful. And if you're a proxy for like your average listener, which I suspect you are, what I would caution people not to do is compare themselves to people like Eric, right? Eric, you're a top 1% kind of outgoing, people-focused type, just person in general, which is an amazing strength, right? And lean into that. I would just say for your listeners, for you, Alex, for me, by the way, I'm like a little bit more like you, Alex, just be in the top 50 percentile of whatever character traits and attributes and personality, quirks and things that we're going to talk about. Like just aim to be above median. And then you're good.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
You will get to know me soon and know that I'm a very A-type personality. And it's like, I guess most dentists, right? I mean, we don't settle for, like, oh, it's good enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, my thought behind personality traits and stuff like that is you're not born with it. Like maybe you are, and maybe you're inclined to do something like maybe a little bit better than someone else, but everything can be learned. Like I don't naturally like to be around people or in front of people or talk to people. But guess what? I learned the skills to do it, and I turn it on when I talk to patients. Like it's just, you got to do it. And, you can stay in your lane and just be like, I'm so scared and I don't want to talk to patients and I just want to focus on, doing the best, DO composite ever. And that's great. That's you. Do you. But for me, it was, I don't want to just be that. I want to, take it to the next level.
Yeah, so I think it's what your goals are. But like the same thing, someone like me who's probably more outgoing, where I probably struggle more, or I know I struggle more, is in like organization and being able to pay attention and doing all that. Whereas like Alex can create systems really well. So my struggle is it's just kind of the opposite of yours. Is I had to learn, and I still work on it, is like how to like keep things focused, how to keep systems in place.
Yeah, but I think the point is that you can learn those skills.
Yeah, you can learn it. It's more challenging,
you don't
for
want
sure,
to
but you can
leave it as like an excuse, like, oh, I don't fit this into this like category of extrovert or whatever, creative, where you fall. So I can't be that. And that's not true.
But that's what Brian was kind of saying too, right? He was saying like, just, you don't have to you don't have to set yourself up to be the most outgoing person. If you're not, you just have to be good enough at it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. In fact, if you don't mind, that is a really perfect segue into the second idea I had. Do you mind if I just kind of go
what's number 2?
Yeah, go with it.
Okay. The second idea that I had that, my team and some of the folks that I reached out to validated was that really successful business owners think and learn for themselves what is true about what everybody's saying. So I've got a couple examples for you, but I suspect you guys will have your own examples. The 2 that I immediately thought of in the transitions world was like the quintessential, maybe like your first job, or you're out of residency, or you're out of that D4 year, a couple years, and you're kind of hearing about different career paths, and you listen to other people complain and whine or talk, and they're like, a common thing that I hear in residency programs when I go speak is, just go get a job at a DSO. That's your best first job. Yeah. And there's some wisdom to that, but like the successful practice owners I've noticed think and learn for themselves. So in other words, what they do is they kind of ask like, why is this person saying a DSO is your best job out of residency? Maybe it is, right? But why is that person saying that thing? Then they'll ask, like, who's not speaking up? Who's like the loudest voice in the room? And are the people that aren't speaking up, what do they know that I don't know? And those could be the ones, by the way, a lot of times it's the ones that, like, dad has a practice, right? So they're like quiet. Yeah. But I'm not talking about those. I am talking about, somebody that just quietly went and got a job in their hometown. They've got it all lined up, and they're just not talking about the fact that they're going to go into private practice. They're going to learn some things you may not learn at a DSO job. Again, my point isn't whether or not a DSO job is a good idea or not. My point is, think and learn for yourself, be skeptical, but like healthily skeptical. It doesn't mean everybody's full of crap. It just means that everybody's answers, and sometimes the loudest answers, aren't necessarily the right ones for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, just for, like, when we see it on, like, Facebook groups, which even, like, the people who run the Facebook groups complain about this, I feel like, is sometimes the people with the loudest voices just have the loudest voice, but their advice is awful. Like, or it's just not actually beneficial. Like, someone's trying to get help, and then the loudest person is just like, that sucks. And you're like, okay, like, thanks, you didn't really help with this. So it is sometimes I've found the person who's like the subdued one, or maybe the one that isn't as loud, that somehow, though, you have to figure out how to get to that person, right? Because they tend to have good advice. But yeah.
The other example I thought of in the transitions world is which bank to use to get your practice loan or your startup loan. And I'll pick on Bank of America. They do the most business in the country. And because online especially, but even in conversations, I've heard this, like, oh, Bank of America sucks. Like, I had this terrible experience. And, again, I bet that dentist is telling the truth. It's not that I doubt that one dentist that had that comment is, like, they're not lying, right? But they're loud and they get a lot of attention. And again, if that one person is making a comment, where are the 10 people that had good experiences and they're not commenting, right? You're not, most people only comment and whine and complain if it's really, really, really good or really, really bad. And, I'll drive home the point on this specific example. Like, the banker you talk to at the bank is just as important as which bank you talk to. So we can talk about the differences between B of A and TD Bank and Provide and Huntington and all the different, like, dental lenders out there. But if you talk to each dental lender, they have 40, 50 salespeople. So if you're talking to the number one salesperson at Provide, or you're talking to number 49 on the number 49 is about to get fired. Like, they're terrible. Of course, that dentist had a crappy experience. And that's why, anyway, so, like, be skeptical of a lot of the comments you hear, but in a healthy way. And by the way, lean on your personal network that you have, right? Because you're in the top 50 percentile of networking, or I should say building a network, not networking. Networking is schmoozy and, kind of has like a negative connotation. But just think and learn for yourself.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, you do have to be. And I think, Alex, you've kind of always been like that too. You're kind of skeptical.
Yeah, I don't trust anyone.
Yeah, you don't. You kind of have that mentality, but you don't go like conspiracy theorist, right? Like, I think what Brian's saying is, like, it's that healthy mix of, like, question, but, like,
I just like proof. Like, that's, like, just give me the facts. Like, I don't want to hear someone's experience because it made them feel good or bad. It's like, I don't care. I want to know what the fact is, and I'll go off of that. Like, give me numbers. That makes more sense.
Which I think is challenging for a lot of us, because a lot of us just rely on emotions because we're humans, and I mean, the argument could be, right, not robot, So I do think that sometimes we all can do a better job of just, like, it's a business. It's not like a human. It's just, you got to follow the facts and then make decisions based on that. Yeah. But you're right with the bankers. And then that goes, it's like, it goes back to a little bit to who you know, right? So, like you were saying, if you're a dentist that has built a network or knows people or is socialized with people, you might somehow make a connection they might make a connection with you, Brian, and then Brian knows a good banker who's at B of A, and it's like, you need to talk to this person. You want to get better terms, you want to get this figured out, this is who you need to talk to. So I think that whole concept is super important. Hey, quick break here. If you're enjoying Just a Couple Dentists, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. It's the best way to keep up with new episodes and hear us argue about dumb stuff and complain about dentistry. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. Now back to the show.
So Eric and Alex, I've got my third point is about comparison. So we've talked a little bit about, like, comparing yourself to others already. And I think you're going to be a little surprised to hear me say that some of the most successful practice owners use comparison in a healthy way. And I'll describe what I mean, but I want to tell you a story first. Okay. I referenced bank loans already, and I work with a lot of dentists who are borrowing a crap ton of money. Okay, like every time somebody's doing a loan, it's $1 million, 1.5, right? Like insane amounts of money. And by the way, I paid back my 6 figures in student loans too, but it was like an MBA program, 2 years versus any. And I look at the student loan balances that dentists come out with, and I'm just like, oh, there's like so much empathy in my heart. So you guys that are struggling through like these big, huge money decisions, good for you, right? Like what I tell a lot of dentists is if you're not nervous, going to borrow a $1.5 million from the bank, like you're insane. Like you're a narcissist, or you're like, there's something wrong with your head. And so good for you if you're like nervous, but also like, don't let it stop you. So I was working with a dentist in Boise, Idaho, of all places. Beautiful place, Treasure Valley. Tons of all the West Coasters are moving there. And he's buying a practice that collects $1 million. Okay. And it was like clockwork, million 2020 during COVID, million 2021, so on and so forth. Huge dip in 2024 to 978. By the way, that's being facetious. Yeah. And the seller put the practice up for sale, 53% overhead. Okay, so profitable. And the average profitability for dental practices in the U.S. is 61.7. Kind of depends on your data source, but like well below average in overhead, which means more money in the pocket of whoever owns that practice. Yep. So Boise dentist is looking around for practice loans because he's going to put in an offer, and he wants the practice so bad he put in an above asking price offer, which happens every once in a while. So the seller listed it for $851. Buyer put in $856. Hey, I'll throw you an extra $5. Yeah. Can I please be the buyer? Right. Okay. Buyer gets his LOI accepted, or his letter of intent, his offer gets accepted. So the next step in the process is to go talk to banks and starts asking around using his personal network. He was online in a couple places, called me, said, which banker should I use? I gave him the name of the right banker at B of A to use. And then use the power of, this is my point about comparison, called a couple other banks. Okay. I think in this case, the individual banks aren't the principle is what's important here, but just for data, I think it was Huntington and Provide in this case. The 3 banks gave offers to Boise Doctor, and Boise Doctor got 4.79 was kind of the low one from B of A. Huntington's was 5.25, and Provide's at the time was 5.5. And we kind of ran the numbers, and the by the way, the Provide banker that had the highest rate. Yeah. And side note, it is not all about the rate. Okay, there are other things to think about with the loan, and we can talk about those if you want to. But just to keep the story concise, Provide bankers started making. I could beat that 4.79. Just give me a chance. Yeah. And the Boise banker started calling around to different people and found out. And I made some calls for the Boise banker, and we found out what the lowest rate is that B of A can do on different deals. Okay. And we found out it was like 4.4 or something like that. Okay. And long story short, the dentist goes with the B of A loan, and then Provide calls. Okay. And Provide beat the crap out of the rate, 4.19. Oh, geez. Over, came down from 5.59 to 4.19. Huge dip, and ended up going with the Provide loan. Okay. So what's the point of the story? There's several points. One is bankers are salespeople. They negotiate just like any equipment rep out there. Yeah. Number 2 is it's not about like if you're listening to this and your takeaway is Provide is the best bank, you missed the point. That is not the point of the story. The point of the story is to use comparison to in a healthy way. And I'll give another example, not just about negotiations, but by the way, we did the math for the dentist. Saved, let's see, it was $118,326. I remembered the number that they saved in interest payments over their 10-year loan.
That's significant.
Just by making some phone calls and things. So when I say like use comparison to your advantage, when you're on, do people still use Dentaltown? Anyway, but you're on some online forum and you're seeing pictures of other dentists' work, or you're hearing about how much other dentists are making, or you're seeing what other dentists are doing for vacation or how they do things with their staff. What I want someone that's listening to take away from this is use it as like fuel to make yourself better, not as proof that you are better than another person. So you're in comparison, you're using these data points to kind of give you fuel to say like, you know what, if I'm honest with myself, their margins are better than mine. How do I get to that point where I can be as good as they are at getting the margins just exactly perfect? Or, you know, they're shading when they do the composite bonding. That actually looks a little bit better than my work. And how can I get better so that I'm a better version of myself? And in this case, the dentist that negotiated, it wasn't like I'm a master negotiator, I'm going to beat people up. It was, I just know there are ways to do this, and I'm going to try to do it the best way that I can with my team. And so anyway, the point is they use comparison as not as proof that they're better than the dentist down the street, but just to like fuel their own competitive natures and to just get better over time. So I think that's the third point, is getting better over time.
I know you, Alex, really buy into that too. And I think for us personally, you know, yeah, you're right. So like back kind of going to that group we were in, we were, you know, there were a lot of dentists that were way more successful than us. Yeah. Like twice as many new patients, 3 times as much production, like killing it. And we could have taken that route of been like, well, we'll never be like them and they're making it up probably. Or we could say, okay, can we learn from them? And so I think, like you said, it's all just how you frame it, right? And so I think we chose to frame it as, well, let's get to that level. Or you start to see dentists who have, like when we were selling our practice, I looked and saw what other dentists, or we both did, like how much did they sell for? How did they do this? How did they grow it? How did they get this multiple or that? And we're like, okay, well, let's see if we can get that or do better. Like how can we, versus just like giving up.
Focus on the negative.
Yeah. And then using it, like you said, is like, then you turn it into a negative, and like you said, then you compare it the other way, and you're like, well, I'm better than so-and-so at least. And so, yeah. I mean, Alex, I know you have a lot to say on that.
Well, no, I agree, like 100%. That's it's so important to take it the other way. So, yeah.
Can I give you the pitfall though of point number 3? Point number 3 is like use comparison to your advantage. Here's the pitfall I see, and it's around egos. And by the way, I'm going to talk about dentists' egos for a second, but before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that my own personal ego is larger than any dentist I've ever met. So I'm not casting stones here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And Eric, Alex, would you guys agree that your average dentist has a healthy ego? Let's just say, like and we can talk about
how are you defining healthy? Is healthy would you are you using healthy? Statement? Yeah. Are you using healthy? Yeah. Are you using healthy in like a negative tone? Is that?
Well, no,
healthy. Oh God.
That's your workaround of being like nice about saying healthy. Yeah, I think a lot of us do, but I think it's like you said, a lot of dentists. I think you kind of have to self-select into that, and especially even if you're doing like owning a practice, right? You have to have gotten good grades, been type A, gotten accepted in. So like you are just by what you've gone through, I guess by definition, probably a higher achiever. So that's right. Probably, I'd say so.
Comes with the territory a little bit.
Yeah. So like to have the confidence that Alex has to put a patient, I don't know if you do sedation, Alex, or not, but like, let's pretend you do, and you put patient to sleep and you're going to cut into their jaw and like literally like try to wake them up. Like I'm glad that you have an ego, that you're confident enough to A, learn how to do that, B, like practice and get good enough, and C, wake me up, right? So like there's an upside to the ego, like you're saying, Eric, but here's the downside is I'm saying, hey, the most successful practice owners use comparison to their advantage, okay? And here's the downside though, is when you make it a contest, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, okay?
Yeah.
So if you're the dentist who has to get the biggest practice to buy, and you always have to be the one in the Facebook with the highest production numbers, and you're always the one that has to have the biggest boat, and you're always the one who has to do their crown prep time faster than anybody else, what's going to happen is you're going to get burnt out. And now your compass is who's number 2 in the race lane coming up behind me, instead of am I better than the best version of myself that I know how to be. Here's what gets people into trouble in transitions is the seller. Okay.
Yeah.
So the seller, prototypical seller, 64 years old, actually average age, by the way, is like 72. And it's 5 years later than the average American that retires, even though dentists make a crap ton more money. We can talk about that separately.
That's interesting.
Stop spending your money. But the average seller, let's just say 65-year-old seller, and they have a number in their head as to what their practice is worth. Okay, now I'm going to go through an exercise. Eric, Alex, bear with me because I'm going to describe some math. Okay. And you got,
Do I need a calculator?
You'll be able to do it, I promise.
Okay.
But can you guys think back to your entry-level statistics class or the first time you saw a normal distribution curve? You picture the normal
like a bell curve.
The bell curve, yeah.
If you're listening, I'm like making motions with my hand, and it's vaguely like I'm outlining a woman. Anyway, and in the middle of a normal distribution is the average, right, or the median, I think is the technical term in statistics class. Okay,
means
if the median is right in the middle, and you asked a dentist who's selling their practice, are you on the lower half of the median or on the upper half of the median?
I think I know where we're
and
going
you
with
asked
this.
100 dentists about their practice. What are 100 dentists going to tell you?
Oh, everyone's above, right?
Everyone's above, right? Yeah. Everybody lives in Lake Wobegon. Everyone's an above average driver. They're the best kisser in the world. And their practice is above average, right?
Yeah.
And so this is what gets a lot of people in trouble in transitions is you go ask the seller, hey, and the seller says, I know, because I read Brian Hanks's book, that the average dental practice sells for 75.86% of last year's collections. Okay, that's a terrible way to value a dental practice, by the way, but it is a data point. And then that seller says, well, if the average is 75.86, then for sure, I'm going to get at least 76% of last year's collections, right?
Yeah.
Because 100 out of 100 dentists that have the ego to carve into my mouth and do dental work think that their practice is above average. But by definition, we all know that if the average is 75.86, that means half of the dental practices in the U.S. sold for less than that amount. Okay.
Well, and even for us, Brian, too, just as a quick aside, like when we were going through the process of selling with a DSO and they do it more based on EBITDA, right? I remember when I was going to Hunter about it and I was like, well, we just did a, expansion, like I think it was like 14 months ago and it's all new equipment. Shouldn't I get more? He's like, cool, but no, like we can't perform, like we can't do that. Like that is cool. And so like, you're right. In your head, you're like, you tend to only look at the positives and you don't look at any of the negatives. And so, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. And then a guy a benefit to hiring someone like me or a lawyer or somebody and this isn't a sales pitch, but it is nice to be able to have someone else to go be the bad cop to that seller or the buyer or whoever, right? To say like, hey, sorry, my accountant says your practice is actually below average and worth less. So I would love to offer you full asking price, but I can't because my dental CPA says I have to, So little tips like that, use your ego. Okay, you've got one. I've got one. Use your ego, but in a healthy way. Use it to make yourself better. And then don't forget that you're not above average in everything. You're a freaking amazing human being if you're a dentist. You are. You're awesome. And the only dentists I know that that aren't rich are like in jail because of some kind of crazy story, right? So like you have an ego, use it in a healthy way, and if you're a practice owner, it's going to help you out.
Yeah,
nice.
Totally.
Cool.
I mean, that's where like I know sometimes I'll almost do the opposite end. Like you'll go in, Alex, and like I think use your ego to like drive you to do more. On my end, I kind of always have struggled with if I don't want to do something or don't like it, I'll shut off pretty quickly. So like I never got in as far as Alex in terms of like wanting to do third molars, right? Or so if there was advice I could give to someone on like just pushing through, if you want to do it, like just get your reps in, right? Like you kind of say, Alex, and you kind of, you're going to suck in the beginning. I think for me, it was always a challenge because it was like, if you sucked, it could be like on a human, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like the part that would always, I think, scare me more. But yeah, that was, I guess, my struggle.
Yeah.
Dude, Eric, you're the king of segues. That's like the perfect segue into my fourth point. Okay. So it's like you host a podcast for a living or something. I saved my most powerful point for last for the podcast listeners that keep going on the treadmill or mowing the lawn or they're driving, right? And they're going to keep listening to the episode. So my very most powerful tip is my last one. And it is around the fear and the reps. Okay. So you said, get your reps in. I've never met zero. I've had exactly zero dentists, and I've done well over 1,200 dental transitions in my career. Okay. Of the 1,200, I've had 1,200 dentists at some point in the transition where they're about to buy a practice or going to start one up or something like that. And by the way, I focus on acquisitions. All 1,200 freaked out at some point. Okay. They all freaked out. Yeah. And again, that's good, right? You're about to borrow $1 million, $500,000, 1.5, whatever the number is. Like, you should have some healthy fear. But the dentists that are successful, the fourth tip I have is they feel the fear and then they do it anyway. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Whatever it is. In this case, it's buying a practice, because that's what I do. But it's learning third molar. It's hiring better. It's giving the negative feedback to your assistant who doesn't do things quite right. It's telling the hygienist she needs to be a little quicker. Feeling the fear is completely normal and rational. Yeah. And the best dentists feel it and they do it anyway. And by the way, we all, this is a very human trait. The ego wants to feel the peace before you take the action. Okay. Yeah. So I'll describe how I see this in dental transitions is, instead of ownership, here's what a lot of dentists do. They go, well, you know what? Maybe I'll buy my practice with my buddy from dental school. Mm-hmm. Okay. We're going to be a partnership.
Yeah.
And there's some wisdom in partnerships, but the main reason people do that is they're scared of taking on ownerships themselves, and they want to offload some of the fear to their friend. Okay.
That opened up a whole floodgate of Eric right here.
Yeah. Whereas I think that's the difference between us is she's way more likely you are to just jump in and get it done. But even with other businesses we've been working on, if we've had partnerships that aren't working out or have failed, I looked back at it because Alex is like, why do you just feel like you have to partner with everyone, right? All the time. Yeah. And it was you hit the nail on the head that it's well, then there's not as much, you don't perceive as much risk. And then you're kind of trying to offload some of the potential failure, and you focus on the failure, and you're like, okay, well, now I'd only be 50%, in charge of that failure. So that's better than 100% because I'm probably going to fail. Right. Exactly. So you have that mindset of failure, and you're trying to reduce that versus saying, oh, I'll have 100% of the success. But what is that thing that we do tend to put a bigger emphasis on failure more than success, right? I don't know what that phrase is.
It keeps you alive. There's a reason our brains do it, right? Exactly. Yeah. And let me think, how else do people do it? The main people do it, manage the fear, is they wait. They say, I'll buy a practice when I feel ready, or when I feel like I have my student loans under control. And guess what? You'll never have that feeling unless the student loans are all the way paid off, in case you waited too long. What else do they do? They'll partner up, right, with a Comfort Dental. I think you mentioned the
or PDS, any of those. Or affordable dentures. Those ones,
the dentures. Yeah. And so I'm going to offer your listeners a couple data points that will maybe reassure them a little bit. But again, before I get into some of these data points, nothing I'm about to say is going to stop the feeling of fear that you have before taking the plunge into ownership. Okay. Let me get to the data points right after I talk about why people get scared. And again, I think it's healthy, but why are dentists scared of ownership? And when I talk to them and they're candid and they're actually honest, it's around the same types of things that every business owner is a little bit scared of. Will I have patients in my chair? Can I attract them to my office? What if my assistant quits? How do I fill a job? How do I manage billing with the insurance companies or with patients who want to argue about their bill? These are basically it's how do I get money into the business? And then how do I kind of manage these expenses at a high level? These are the types of questions that they're nervous about. And so I've got 2 data points. All right. Okay. Data point number 1 is it's more math focused and it's more kind of esoteric, but it's powerful. Okay. I've talked with the CEOs, and when I say CEO, I don't mean the top CEO of the business line for the dental lending groups at the 4 big national dental lenders: Huntington, US Bank, Provide, B of A. I've talked to all 4 of them. And I've asked him this question about what is your charge-off rate? Okay. Now, charge-off rate is it's a banking term that is how much money did we lose on dental practice loans?
Okay.
Okay. So if you loan 1,000 dentists $1 million each to buy practices, you're doing the interest rate is to compensate you for the risk of lending that money out on the street. And you know that of 1,000, a few of them won't pay it back for whatever reason, right? Divorce, death, they got into the nitrous, they're in jail, whatever it is, okay? The charge-off rate at some of the biggest dental lenders is actually a negative number. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Meaning dental loans are the safest freaking loan on the planet, with the one exception being funeral homes and funeral parlors. Okay.
So that makes sense.
Dental practice loans are the safest loan on the planet, with only one exception. So if you're nervous you're going to pay back your loan, that's good. I'm happy that you're a normal human being. And the data point I want you to remember is, if a bank agrees to lend you money, it is almost a certainty you will be able to pay them back. Okay?
Yep.
So that's data point number 1. Data point number 2 is a little more fun. All right, Alex, can I pick on you for a second?
Okay.
How many students in your D4 class, your graduating group of D4 dentists?
There's like 100 of us.
100. Okay, perfect. Of that 100, how many, that's perfect, by the way, because it's easy percentages.
Yeah.
How many would you let work on your teeth? You don't have to name names. You can keep it anonymous.
I won't, but those are the only listeners here, so. Gosh, how many? I don't know, maybe 10. I started at 25 and then I went down. So maybe like 10 to 15.
Actually, what's hilarious, I've asked a lot of people that question. It's actually higher than the average number I get from people. So
oh, wow.
You're even more trusting.
We had an excellent class
than the average dentist out there. Okay.
That's funny.
So 10%. That's like I said, I'm smiling a little bit because I'm like, oh, this is like a trusting soul. Alex,
a little bit. I mean, Eric takes one of them because he was in my class.
Okay,
so
nice
so that's
job.
one, and yeah.
You sure?
You name one. You don't have to name the other 9.
Well, what kind of treatment were we talking about? Like cleaning? Like you can clean my teeth?
Cleaning or buckle pits? Yeah, let me do that all day.
Okay,
he did do.
I did do a filling.
Yeah,
on you,
yeah, you actually did.
And it's been okay for
now.
now.
Yeah. I did trust you.
Was
because
that
I couldn't do it
pin-free
myself.
No, we don't need to know. Okay.
No, the thing is that I couldn't do it myself.
Yeah,
Like,
that was her first choice.
Yeah.
And then when that wasn't an option, then it was like, I guess I'll trust someone.
No, I could probably name about 10 people that I would trust. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay. Now, you probably don't know the precise answer to my next question, but you can guess, and you can just give me an estimate. How many of the 100 own their own practice?
Ooh, Eric, what do you think? Maybe, do you think 50? Think half of them do?
Well, we're 10 years, a little over 10 years out, right? So I think that factors into it.
The statistics would say it's
50.
it's about 72% nationwide of dentists that are about 10 years out. It's about 72%. But again, your class may be a little bit more or less or whatever, just depending on, whatever factors. So here's what's interesting. And another version of the same question is, okay, Dr. Associate that's thinking about buying a practice, think about the 5 to 10 dental practices that are closest to you in a geographic radius. Think about the 2 questions of, A, would you let those dentists work on your teeth? Most of the time, people are like violently shaking their head. Yeah. No, I would never let Dr. Smith down the street work on my teeth. I've seen his work. It's terrible. Mm-hmm. And then I say, but Dr. Smith's making it work. Dr. Smith owns a practice. He's paying back his loan. Like, it seems like he's going on vacation to Disneyland with his kids. Like, if Dr. Smith, the joker who can't, do a filling without causing excruciating pain to their patient, and that's terrible work, if they can make a practice, if they can make ownership work, do you think you could do it too? And that's my second data point is, if all these jokers out there that you wouldn't let work on your own teeth own practices and they're doing okay, what makes you so scared that you don't think you're at least as good as they are?
Real quick, if you're into what we're talking about and want more, check out my newsletter, Just 2 Minutes. It's the dental blog you can actually read between patients. No fluff, no BS, just straight up tips, stories, and insights to help you level up. You can subscribe over at coupleofdentists.com or just hit the link in our show notes. Now back to the pod. Yeah, that's a good point. the bar is very low.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I get it. No, that totally makes sense. That logic tracks.
Yeah.
And I mean, so the one point you had made too was when people are afraid of, oh, if I lose an employee, right, and then I have to hire someone. I mean, it does kind of suck with like how hard it is to, like, it is harder to hire in dental, I feel like, than it has been in the past for other reasons. But I remember that used to always scare me a lot. And then I don't know, Alex, we had to look up like a couple weeks ago, we had to look up some file from when we used like Gusto, who was like our payroll company and stuff. And I remember looking at like the employee list, and Alex you had that practice. She had her practice pretty much. We used Gusto as like 2017 or 2018 maybe to 2023, and then mine was like 2019 to 2023, so 4 to 5 year period. I mean, it shows 20, people on one page. I think I had to click through like 4 times. Like they're so like. So
and I don't even remember some of those names.
There's names where I have no idea who they are, and it's not even that long of a period.
Yeah.
And the point to that is, it's okay to be scared, but it happens to everyone, and it still figures out a way. Like it still it still works out. And like if you would have told me in the beginning we were going to go through in 5 years 60 employees, right, between hygienist, front, back, like all that stuff, I'd been like, holy crap, there's no way I could handle this, and it probably would have prevented me from buying a practice. I can't handle that. But it's like we got through it. We grew them to a good level. I mean, enough to be able to sell them to a DSO, so it has to be at a certain level. And that was still with going through probably 60 people. And so like it's going to happen, just, so yeah, I think. Well,
and I think also you just have to kind of look at what kind of problems do you want? Do you want those problems, which are hiring, firing, payroll, like all the things, or other problems from being an associate, not being able to make your decision, not being able to do this? It's like throw all of the questions into the table at the middle and like pick one. And do you want that one that is like, oh, as an associate I can only make this amount?
It's a good point. Like there's problems. Which problems do you everywhere. Want? But just accept there's problems.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, you kind of have to pick, and it's like, well, maybe I can probably like dive into this problem and like I can take it and I will learn from it, and then that problem doesn't become less of a problem. I've just become really good at solving it now. So like hiring and firing that 60th person, it's like, see you later. You just don't. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not as bad because you've gotten better at it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, then it's like, what does the problem that you get better at, how much better does it make you? You could argue if you're an associate, you're like, oh, well, I'm just on W-2 pay and I'm never going to own a practice and have an asset or anything like that. Well, that problem will always be there. Versus if you owned a practice and you got really good at hiring, or you got really good at running a practice more efficiently, that has, from a financial standpoint, a more of an upside, right? Like it's not as capped. So I think it just depends what you want.
It's good. I love the way you said that, Alex. You can you're going to have a set of problems no matter which way you go. But the problems that associates are feeling, or the employee dentists are feeling, are ones that are known versus the unknown of practice ownership problems. And the unknown problems, here's the secret. Maybe this is a third data point, is you can buy solutions to most of the ownership problems that you're going to face.
Totally.
Average associate makes $181,000 according to my data in the U.S. Average dental practice owner makes $323,000. So that $150,000 delta, again, I'm using averages and everybody's situation is unique, but can you buy your way out of $150,000? With $150,000, could you buy a consultant, a marketing company, someone to help you with hiring and firing and some of the management, or a really good office manager or something like that, right? So everyone wants the peace of not feeling fear. And the peace that you want comes after you make the decision. Practice ownership is a lot like marriage. It's a lot like parenting. It's a lot like going to college or not going to college. You're nervous before you do it. Then you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? But the oh my gosh, what have I done lasts about 30 days. And then everybody kind of settles in and they find solutions, and sometimes they pay for solutions. And you talk to practice owners 5 years after they bought and you say, hey, you waited 7 years after dental school to buy a practice. Do you wish what do you think about that timeline?
Yes. Yeah.
100 out of 100 say, I wish I wouldn't have.
I wish I would have done it earlier. That's one of those things, I think, getting into ownership, right, when you can, not waiting, like you said. Yep. It's like anyone, too, like, I don't know. I've never met someone that I know that has gotten in really good shape, worked out really hard, and has said, like, I regret that. Like, there's just certain things in life that you do, and anyone no one ever regrets doing it, right? And so it's like maybe focus on those things that you have all those data points of everyone saying that it always ends up in a positive. And why don't you just do that? Because it's going to be a positive for you too.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming on, Brian. We really appreciate it. And
we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
My pleasure. See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.